Clay and I have been worried for a while here about where this is going to go with the Biden administration, because here's a very broad overview of the situation as it is right now. There are over 200 million Americans as of today who have been vaccinated. Cases right now are 300% higher than they were a year ago, 12 months ago to the day, when there were exactly 0 people vaccinated. We know that. We also know that there were a whole lot of infections in the wintertime last year. The highest, the absolute peak, was in December, January period of 2020. So there's a lot of natural immunity out there. Clay, how is it that tonight we have a Biden speech where they're going to essentially tell us the federal government is going to ram more Fauciism down our throats, when they don't even attempt to explain how we could have more natural immunity, 200 million doses of vaccine or, full vaccination already in the population, and 300% more cases, and some places even having record hospitalization? Do they even have an answer?
It is the essence of the questions that should be asked of the Biden administration and Dr. Fauci if our media did a good job of asking questions that matter. I mean, you got right to the essence of what the data is telling us. And the ultimate test, I think this is going to be a fascinating window, Buck, because Biden is speaking at 5 o'clock Eastern, right? And he's going to lay out all these new regulations, more requirements for federal employees, contractors, mandates as much as he can, encouraging private industry to mandate as well. And then this is going to be interesting, Buck, because you're going to have Biden talk at 5 and basically say, hey, everything is a disaster with COVID, and we got to blame everybody who's not getting vaccinated. And then a couple of hours later, you're going to have the NFL kicking off down in Tampa, Ron DeSantis' backyard, and you are going to have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys playing, and there's going to be 75,000 fans, biggest and first sellout crowd in the NFL since the Super Bowl in 2020, right? All the way back then. And there's going to be this fascinating dichotomy where you're going to have a lot of American sports fans saying, hey, it's time to get on with our life. And you're going to have the federal government and Joe Biden hectoring everyone and saying, hey, you can't get on with your life because of COVID right now. And that dichotomy, we saw it, Buck, with college football. Fauci and all the Fauciites are furious at college football fans. I think the NFL, as the bigger production, is going to put this thing on steroids, and you're going to have these two conflicting images. Biden saying, hey, hide in your basements. You're not safe. And then you're going to have college football and these NFL fans for the first time ever saying, hey, it's time to get back to normal. And I'm going to love to see how this is covered.
They're not even hiding anymore, Clay, that their goal here is to make every man, woman, and child in the country get the shot. And they want to make people get the shot at a time when we also know that it is not the end. Yes. It's not like it's over. Remember, that was the pitch in April and May. Get the shot, you're done. It is absolutely not the case. No person will tell you, get this shot and you're done anymore, not based on the Fauciite logic. They're not even dealing with that reality. They just want to force. I mean, you mentioned the federal government has over 2 million employees. Right. I used to be a federal government employee. So, back in my old CIA days, if we would fast forward and then the pandemic had happened, I would have had the choice of, okay, I served my country in a couple of war zones for the CIA. Now maybe I've been in, 10 or 15 years. I'm going to lose my job, even if I have natural immunity from never mind that it's a conscience, I think, violation for those who have, no immunity, no antibodies, whatever. But on top of that, people with natural immunity, there's no exemption, no exceptions at all. The federal government is expected to make everyone who works for it get the shot. That's what Biden's going to say tonight. And then, and this is the piece that I've been warning about, they're just going to find every point of leverage coercion that they have at the state level, where Democrats are in charge, the local level, wherever possible. They're going to rely on activist judges and the private sector. Biden, the federal government, has a lot of carrots and sticks when it comes to private corporations, and they're going to try to get some of the biggest companies in America to say, you get the shot or you're fired. Full stop.
There's two things that I want to unpack that you just said that I think is really good. First of all, if everybody in America who is 12 and older had the vaccine, COVID's still not going away, right? And that is where I think the Biden administration is failing in terms of their messaging, because a lot of people out there, look, 75% of people who are 18 and over have already gotten one shot. We were told back in May, hey, get the shot, you'll never have to wear a mask anywhere again. And also we were told if we have 70% by July 4th, effectively, this thing will be over. Well, we didn't hit it by July 4th, but here we are September 8th or whatever the heck it is, and we have ended up with 75% of all 18 and ups who have gotten the virus, and who have gotten the shot, and for 12 and up, it's 72%. I believe those are the most recent numbers. Other thing here, Buck, I think the private industry part of this is where Biden is really going to lean on everybody. I was out last night at an event with people who work in radio, local radio, and I'll just say it, they work at Cumulus, which is a major national radio company. They have mandated that every single Cumulus employee get the vaccine. Every single one of them. The CEO came out and said it. And I think there are a lot of people out there working at companies and in our industry. Certainly, if it's happening all over this country, where people who are in private industries not connected at all to the federal government are being told, get the vaccine or you lose your job. That's what Biden is going to try to do. He's going to try to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to lean on everybody out there who has a company to be making these vaccine mandates.
And just everyone needs to understand when they say, oh, but the private sector, first of all, the private sector can't do whatever it wants in a million different ways. We could all sit here and discuss. Think of all the different.
It's a private company. There's all sorts of restrictions on private companies.
I don't want big government in my private company. There are tons of regulations that affect private companies, workplace environment, hostile environment, diversity and inclusion stuff. There's all these different rules that already exist. And now here we are. We're starting to see, I think, people realizing that unless there are individual rights protected by government here, everyone's going to start getting steamrolled. Oh, you think your local public school has got a decent board? Oh, well, the Department of Education's got a different feeling on that one. You think that the company that you work for is going to protect your rights? Well, maybe actually, Clay, you're a lawyer. What if they don't actually create any protections from liability for companies?
This is what you got into with Noam. As well, right?
No, but I mean that they can sue, right? Yes. So now you're in a situation where if a company's going to be liable for somebody who gets sick and dies from COVID, if they don't have a vax mandate, we haven't even tested some of these things. You're going to see everyone getting it, and that's why I think it's interesting. Ron DeSantis, if I may, now this is from a week ago, but we haven't played it yet for everybody. He is saying, I don't know, he kind of sounds a little bit like somebody else when he talks about protecting government's role is not to say, oh, I want a small government. Government's role is to protect individual freedom and liberty with the Constitution as its primary shield for that. Here's from a week ago, DeSantis.
At the end of the day, my philosophy is, as governor, my job is to protect your individual freedom. My job is not to protect corporate freedom. That is not what I'm here for. I mean, we have a good business climate, we have everything, but this idea that businesses can just do whatever they want and invade your privacy and doing all that, no, I'm not signing up for that. I'm signing up for protecting your freedom and making sure we have a society in Florida where people can make the best decisions for themselves and for their families. And that's what we're doing by protecting against these mandates and making sure that that's done based on what people believe is best for them and their families. But
I'm glad that Governor DeSantis is not bullied around by corporate interests in his state. There's at least some hope, Clay. There's some encouragement here for those of us who don't want to be part of the steamroller. New York's already been hit with it, folks. We're done here. They're coming for you elsewhere in the country, though. That's the point.
And I think what we need to discuss more, too, about this, Buck, there is and I want to keep hammering this, there's this false ideal that if 100% of people were vaccinated, this thing would go away, right? I mean, for a long time, the past 18 months, there's always been a new villain, right? Well, if everybody just wore their masks, well, if everybody just stayed home and locked down harder, well, if schools were shut down, well, if this state would not allow people to be on the beaches, if they would shut down parks, like all of these things that have been required have all failed, right? And what is going to fail, and I hate to say it, but this is what the data reflects, is we are being sold a bill of goods, which is if everybody was vaccinated, COVID would go away. We're at 75% vaccinations already, Buck. And COVID's not going away.
Going away? It's
here forever.
3 times worse than it was a year ago.
So the argument that is going to be made by Joe Biden, they keep trying to say, oh, we only have a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's not true. That's not true at all. And again, looking at the data is important here and recognizing what's the next step, even if 100% of people are vaccinated.
There are 2 fundamental fallacies that coincide in all this. And we obviously, Clay, we're both fired up about this. We'll come back into this in a second. One is that the people making the decisions really know what they're doing. And 2, the people who don't listen to the people who have been making all these decisions are the problem. Both of those things are false. And we need to come back and explain why that is and what else is going on here. And, I mean, when you hear about what's going on in schools in New York City right now, folks, not even normal a little bit. Not even normal a little bit. We'll come back to it in a second.
Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. We're talking about the president's address at 5 o'clock Eastern on COVID. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. Encourage you to go download the podcast. You can search out my name, Clay Travis. You can search out Buck Sexton's name. You can also find us anywhere on social media. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you, Texas and Arkansas fans, this weekend in Fayetteville, Arkansas for a big football game. Buck, I don't know if you saw this stat. I wanted to hit you with it because one of the things that's happening right now with COVID is they are trying to terrify parents all the time. We were talking about this after the show ended yesterday. CNN's always got up a headline, children hospitalizations, pediatric dangers, everything else. This stat blew my mind. Buck, more kids have been shot in Chicago this year than have died with COVID in the country. Think about that stat for a minute. More kids shot in Chicago this year, Chicago alone, than have died with COVID in the entire country. That's Joe Kinsey, a story that he's got up on Outkick right now. I was reading that, and I was like, wow, this is unbelievable.
This is one of the areas where I will say I actually have underestimated the degree of ignorance, and I've dug into this more when you mentioned that there were parents, because then I talked to Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire, about it as well, offline. Yeah. I've talked to other people. My friend here, Carol Markowitz, who does great work for the New York Post. She's been a total, freedom advocate during the craziest periods of the lockdowns here. And whenever I talk to them about this, they say, no, there really are a lot of parents. I mean, it's not a majority, but there are a lot of parents who think their kid's going to get COVID and die. They're terrified of this. And this is pure disinformation from CNN running headlines about, pediatric hospitalizations way up. Well, if they're way up from, 50 to 70, I mean, this is not a massive public health crisis by any stretch of the imagination. But people see the headline, they see the way it's being manipulated, and parents are terrified. I mean, Clay, you've got kids. I don't. It's on parents, right? It's one thing. You want to kind of YOLO. You want to go out there and go to big events and super spreaders or whatever they're calling it, also known as living your life.
Yeah.
That's on you, right? But when you're making decisions for your kids as a parent, that's a whole other level of responsibility. And if you've got bad information because of all the Fauciites,
and you have your fears being played upon. And Jen Psaki, let's play this. Like, how much of your lives going to change, basically, she was asked. And she gave kind of a snide remark.
There will be new steps the president announces tomorrow, absolutely.
And will any of those new steps influence the average American's day-to-day life? Should we expect any new mitigation recommendations, as an example?
It depends on if you're vaccinated or not.
Oh, if you're vaccinated, the world is your oyster. You'll never
notice
have to
how
worry
she says
about
that, too. It's like, it depends on, are you like an idiot savage or a really good, smart person who listens to Fauci? Like, that's basically what she's saying.
Yeah, I remember Jen Psaki, and we teed off on her for this, too. I mean, she's a parent. I think she has a kindergartner, and she tried to terrify everybody out there by saying, I would be terrified if my kids were going to school and they weren't wearing masks, even though masks don't work in schools, as the data reflects, and even though kids are not under danger. I mean, again, you can go read that stat about Chicago. Think about that. More kids shot in Chicago, Buck, than have actually died of COVID this year.